Hey guys, so the new year is here, and it's my conviction that you will only ever have as great of a year as the books that you choose to read in it. So I want to kick off this year with 12 books that I promise you will transform your life if you read them in this next year. Let's jump right into it. The first book on the list I don't actually have a physical copy of, but it's going to be Seven Men and the Secrets to Their Greatness by Eric Metaxas. This book is one of my favorite, what I like to call mini biography books. He basically takes seven men and writes a 20-30 page-ish just mini biography of their whole life, and kind of taking a broad strokes overview of what they did, why they were incredible, why God used them the way that he did, and then some lessons that you can draw from that and apply to your own life. I love this book and these type of books because they are a great kicking off point to delving in further, right? So you have some books that are, like your Ron Chernow biographies that are a 850 page biography of Grant, and you're like, well, I don't really know if I am that interested in Grant. And so it's really nice to have something where you can get a broad strokes overview of someone, and then whatever guy's story sticks out of that at you, then you can jump further in with a more in-depth book. But I love this book. Eric is a great writer, and the men that he chooses to look at are guys who just are so inspiring, and the way that God used them is just so incredible, and the lessons that he pulls out of it are just very applicable to be able to go into a new year and be like, okay, I want to be more like George Washington in this way. I want to be more like this guy in this way. I want to be more like this guy in this way. So definitely start out with that one. It's such a great book, and it'll set you up well for even some more reading outside of this list if you get to it. Next up, we have one of my newest favorite novels. This is A Tale of Three Kings by Gene Edwards. It's super short. You could read it in a day. You can read it in one sitting. But oh my gosh, is it incredibly powerful. This book, if you let it, will just reach down, rip your heart out, and just expose everything in your heart that is not right and how you judge other people and how you think about other people and how you try to take the speck out of someone else's eye before you take the log out of your own eye. This book is incredibly powerful book, and super short, really easy one to kick you off right on the fiction side of things. Next up, we have a book that made it into my favorites of 2023 list. This is The Warrior Poet Way by John Lovell. I've talked a lot about this book. If you've seen any of my other videos, you've heard about it before. What I will say about this one is that it is currently my top pick for a one-stop shop book on manhood, because John does such a great job balancing the badass warrior poet side, or the badass warrior side, I should say, with the humble and meek and gentle poet side, right? And he's not just a badass bang bang operator. He's also incredibly smart, incredibly thoughtful, incredibly kind and loving to his wife and his kids. And he's just a great, well-rounded man. And I think this book offers just one of the best holistic views of what a wholehearted Christian man should be. And to follow that up, I'm going to give another one that's actually a recommendation from John Lovell, which is a parable called Sir Knight of the Splendid Way. I read this one on Kindle. It's very short. It's like a abbreviated version of Pilgrim's Progress, but I actually liked it way more than I liked the original Pilgrim's Progress. It is just the story of Sir Knight of the Splendid Way and how he goes through all the trials that lead to the great kingdom. And it is just a beautiful allegory, and it's very, very impactful. I find that sometimes the simplest stories are the ones that can speak the clearest to things, because it's just right there in the open. And you can go too far in that, and it can be so on the nose that it misses the point. But then there's other times where it's so clear and so obvious that you're like, oh man, dang. So yeah, definitely check that one out. It is a great little novel, and it's kind of like the Tale of Three Kings, where honestly you could read it multiple times throughout the year and you would be better off for it every single time that you pick it up. Next, we have my favorite financial book at the time. This is Simple Money, Rich Life by my friend Bob Lotick. Bob and Linda teach a financial class that my wife and I have gone through in person and then also gone through online again, called True Financial Freedom. I actually have a link for that in the description if you want to check that class out. It is wonderful. I cannot recommend it highly enough. I recommend any and all of their classes. But Bob's book is the best financial book from a Christian perspective that I know of. And I have read a lot of financial books. So yeah, I absolutely love this one. I love the way that Bob balances. Here is the wisdom and the wise thing to do and the stuff that makes sense and like how the world works, but also be prepared for God to call you to things that don't line up with that at times, right? So he doesn't just go all over on this like, oh, you don't have to pay attention to wisdom side, but he also doesn't be like, oh no, like don't worry, God's never going to call you to do something stupid. Like God will call you to do stupid things that don't make sense and don't line up with the numbers, right? And so I feel like Bob and Linda just balance that so well in all of their teaching in the book, in the class. They just do such a great job of balancing. Here's the wisdom, but also stay open to what God's saying and what God wants to do in your life. So yeah, this is literally, if I could only recommend one financial book, it would be this one. It's so good, and they're such genuine people, and I love that they do their work together. Linda writes parts of the book too, and it's just great. Her voice is amazing. I love what she has to say. I love the energy that she adds to stuff, and it's just really fun getting a book from a couple like that. So, Simple Money, Rich Life, Bob Lodick. Next up, we'll turn to a classic, and this is going to be The Republic by Plato. This is one of the foundational texts of Western civilization that almost nobody has read. And I'm counting this one in the fiction category. That's a little loose, like maybe not, but I'm going to count it as fiction because it reads as easily as some fiction. It's not nearly as difficult as I thought it was going to be. I was very nervous kind of going into this of like, okay, this is going to be this is going to be my textbook, and kind of thought it was going to be more along the lines of like a Democracy in America type thing that's just like, oh, this is difficult, and it really wasn't. It's much more, it's written as a story, and it reads much more like a story with just great insight within it. It's so thought-provoking. It's so thought-provoking, and you see so much of the foundation of what led to Western civilization. It's a very accessible for what it is classic, and after you've read it, you have bragging rights. You know, people are like, hey, what did you do with your 2024? And you're like, well, I read Plato. What did you do? Following that, we have The Road Back to You by Ian Morgan Cron. This was the first Enneagram book that I engaged with, and although I will say that it's not my favorite Enneagram book, and it's not the one that has changed me the most, this book was a great introduction to the Enneagram, and the Enneagram has been one of the most helpful things as far as spiritual and emotional and just personality growth in me, and an understanding how I'm wired, and especially an understanding how I'm broken and how God wants to use that and heal that and bring that all together. So yeah, be prepared to do some serious heart work. If you really want to take this seriously, you need to read this book with a journal. You need to be sitting down, doing listening prayer, letting God speak to you through it, and really digging up a bunch of the stuff, a bunch of the brokenness that's in your own heart. But if you do that, this book will legitimately change your life. Next up, we have a novel that has been a failsafe for me. I don't know how many guys who don't like reading that I've told to read this book who have all read it, finished it, and loved it. And that is The Last of the Breed by Louis L'Amour. Louis L'Amour is traditionally more of a Western writer. This book is actually about a guy who's of Native American descent, and he was a fighter pilot during the Cold War, and he gets shot down over Russia, and he has this Russian Spetsnaz dude who's like tracking him down and trying to capture him, and it's this bro just bringing out his American Indian side and surviving in the wilds of Russia and Siberia, and it is just killer. This book, if this book does not make you fall in love with Louis L'Amour, there is literally something wrong in your head. Louis L'Amour is one of the greatest storytellers of all time. He's one of the best storytellers of stories of men and how to live that warrior poet life. He brings stories, fictional stories, but just great examples of what the warrior poet looks like. They're just great. They're just great stories. Louis L'Amour is the bomb. You need to be reading Louis L'Amour, period. Always. Every year. Read at least one. Next up, we have another book that I read this past year, and this is Unlimiting God by Richard Blackaby. This book is increasing your capacity to experience the divine, and the core message of this book is basically, if you read the Bible and you see promises in the Bible where God says, this is what life with me should be like. Like one of my favorite examples that he uses is there's the passage where in the Bible it says, call to me and I will show you great and mighty things which you didn't know before, right? And so his premise is, if you read that promise in the Bible and you sit here and you go, well, I'm not experiencing that. Like, I don't know when the last time I was revealed a great and mighty thing that I didn't know before. I don't know when the last time that happened to me was. His premise is, okay, well, the one thing we can be sure of is that God's not the problem. So if you're not experiencing what the Bible says you should be experiencing, or you can be experiencing, God's not the problem, so it's something you're doing, right? And it's kind of like the extreme ownership of spirituality books, right? And it just will kick your butt. But this book unlocks so many things for me and how I think differently and how I approach kind of these promises and these things of being able to say, okay, like if I'm not experiencing this, it's not because God changed his mind. It's not because God is all of a sudden like, oh no, like that doesn't apply to you, right? There's something in me that is the problem in this. And so humbly coming and asking God, like, okay, what does that look like for me? How do I heal out of this? What do you want to work in me in order to be experiencing all this? So this book, insanely powerful book, and really challenging and faith stirring upping. So love this one. So for number 10, I don't actually have my physical copy right now because a friend is borrowing it, but this is going to be The Count of Monte Cristo. And one of the reasons I want you to read this book is because it's honking. Like, it's huge. You pick it up and you're like, oh my gosh, like there's no way I can read this book in a whole year, much less like 5 years, right? But this book is an amazing example of, even though it's big, the story is written so well and the characters are so engaging, and the premise of it is so just like, what? Everything about it feels so real that it doesn't feel as big as it is. And you get through and you're just reading it, and you're starting to get to the end and you're kind of like, oh man, I don't want it to end. Like, I just want it to keep going. I want to find out more. I want to stay with these characters more. I want to live in this world more. And so this is one of those books that if you read it, again, one, you have bragging rights because you're like, yeah, I just spent 2024, read The Count of Monte Cristo right after I read Plato. It's whatevs. I'm a reader now. But it's just a genuinely amazing story. It's so good. It's so riveting. And Edmond Dantes is just, again, another example of this like ultimate warrior poet dude, where it's like he is freaking badass, but also he is smart as heck. And it just is someone that you're just like, I want to be like him. I want to be like him when I grow up. Second to last, we have another nonfiction. This is Do Hard Things by Steve Magnus. This book is Why We Get Resilience Wrong and the Surprising Science of Real Toughness. And I love this book. This book scientifically confirmed so many things that I feel like I know intuitively, but just felt kind of wrong because they're like culturally not where stuff is at on a lot of things. But so much of this book goes to how we have tried to train toughness and tried to train character by forcing it on people, and specifically like on kids and stuff, by like forcing them to do this thing, and how that's not what develops real toughness and real character and real capacity for things. Like, it has to be something that is a choice from the person. You have to choose to do a hard thing, and that makes you tougher. If someone forces you to do a hard thing, it might end up making you tougher, but it also might just make you resentful, and then out of that resentment, you become more of a wuss because you refuse to do hard things later on. And so this book was just great, absolutely great parenting book, but also coaching book, but also just self-improvement book, looking at like, okay, where are the points in my life that I'm actively choosing to engage with discomfort and engage with hard things in order to grow this character and this resilience and this ability to handle difficult things throughout my life, right? I don't think this one made it onto my top of 2023, but it was. I'll add it as an honorary mention in there because this book was wonderful. And then finally, the last entry, I have one more novel for you guys. This is A Man Called Ove, or technically Over is how you say it in Swedish. I don't remember. I think it's Swedish. Sweden, yeah. He's a Swedish guy. Yeah, Sweden. The one word that I can use for this book is that it is charming. And you know what? While we're practicing being warrior poets and growing our badass side and growing our intellect and all rah 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 rah, and I'm the sharpest tack in the box with the sharpest knife in the box, and I'm all that, we need to continually be engaging with things that are just charming and lighthearted and fun. And one of the things that I love about this book is that if you're married or if you have a girlfriend or whatever, this is a book that she will love too. Everyone that I have let borrow this book, I have told, hey, read it, like you read it, or have your wife read it and then have your husband read it or whatever. And you can read it together because it is just the most charming story of this curmudgeonly old man and how the people in his life kind of bring him back to life after the tragedy of his wife passing away. And it is just beautifully written. It's such a great story. It's so engaging, and it's one, again, that has never failed. Everyone who I've ever recommended this book to has loved it. I literally cannot imagine someone not liking it. There's just nothing not to like about it. So that's the one that I want to round out this list with. One of my favorite novels ever, A Man Called Ove by Frederick Bachman. So there you go. I hope you guys enjoyed that. There's 12 books, one for each month for this next year. If you read these, I promise you they will transform your heart, your emotions, your thinking, your body, your life as a whole, and they are great books. And if you want to have a great year, I believe you have to engage with great books. So if you guys have great books that you would like to recommend for me, I would love to hear them. Please leave me a comment down below and let me know. And if you're not subscribed already, make sure you subscribe. I'm putting out videos all the time, and just, yeah, I'm reading all the time and trying to give you guys some good books for you to read. So I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you have a great new year, and yeah, keep reading.